He was a genius on the board, a teacher to thousands, and a voice that made chess feel alive. But at just 29, Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky's light went out far too soon. Today, we honor his brilliance, his kindness, and the legacy he left behind. If you believe every story deserves to be told with truth and respect, like, subscribe, and join us as we remember the mind behind the moves. The story of Daniel Naroditsky begins not under bright lights or roaring crowds, but in a quiet California suburb where the sound of a chess clock was just another heartbeat in the Naroditsky home. At 6 years old, Daniel sat across from his father, his small fingers tracing wooden chess pieces as if they held secrets only he could see. To anyone else, it was just a game. To Daniel, it was a language, a silent code of strategy, patience, and imagination. By 8, he wasn't just playing, he was winning. Teachers noticed his intense focus, the way his eyes narrowed before each move as though he could see several futures ahead. Classmates gathered around him during recess, watching in awe as he solved chess puzzles faster than anyone they'd ever seen. His mother once said, he didn't just play chess, he lived inside it. At 12, Daniel claimed gold at the 2007 World Youth Chess Championship in the under 12 category. It was more than just a victory. It was a glimpse of destiny. He became the youngest player to win the Northern California K-12 Chess Championship, a feat that made his name echo through the chess community. Still, what stood out wasn't just his talent. It was his humility. Daniel wasn't obsessed with being better than others. He was driven to understand the game itself. He once said, "Chess is like life. You win some, you lose some, but every game teaches you something." By 14, while most teens were still figuring out high school life, Daniel had already written a book, Mastering Positional Chess. It was insightful, mature, and filled with wisdom far beyond his years. People didn't just see a prodigy anymore. They saw a teacher, a thinker, and a philosopher in the making. At 18, Daniel achieved the highest title in the game, Grandmaster. It was the ultimate recognition of his brilliance, a title earned through countless hours of study, sacrifice, and sleepless nights. But even then, Daniel remained grounded. When asked what it felt like to be a Grandmaster, he simply said, "It feels like there's still more to learn." Behind his calm smile and gentle manner was a mind that never stopped working. Every game was a story, every move a reflection of his inner world. To his peers, he was gifted beyond comprehension. To his friends and family, he was kind, patient, and endlessly curious. But even for a genius, greatness carries its own weight. Expectations grow heavier, and silence grows louder when the world looks to you for brilliance every single day. For Daniel, chess wasn't only competition, it was devotion. But devotion, no matter how pure, can become a quiet storm. By 2020, Daniel's life had evolved from tournaments and trophies to something much greater. He had become the Grandmaster in Residence at the Charlotte Chess Center, guiding young players and inspiring an entire new generation. He was more than an instructor. He was a mentor, a friend, and a symbol of everything beautiful about the game. Students said he had a way of explaining complex ideas with warmth and humor. He didn't just teach people how to win, he taught them how to think. When the world shut down during the pandemic, Daniel adapted. He turned to Twitch and YouTube, where he streamed under the name Danya. And what started as simple online lessons became something remarkable. Thousands tuned in from around the world to watch him analyze games, laugh at blunders, and celebrate brilliant moves. He made chess accessible, human, and alive. His voice carried calm authority and playful charm, making every viewer feel like they were sitting right there with him. Daniel didn't just build a following, he built a community. For many, his streams were more than content. They were comfort, a place where strategy met serenity, where intellect met compassion. But behind every bright screen, there are quiet moments no one sees. Long nights preparing lessons, endless hours of practice, the pressure to keep inspiring, to keep performing. Daniel carried it all with grace. Yet even grace can hide exhaustion. By 2025, Daniel had become one of the most respected figures in modern chess, an educator, commentator, and voice for the game's new generation. He had everything: respect, purpose, and admiration from across the globe. Then, suddenly, everything went silent. In October 2025, the Charlotte Chess Center released a short, heartbreaking statement. It is with deepest sorrow that we announce the unexpected passing of Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky. We ask for privacy for his family during this extremely difficult time. The chess community was stunned. Shock turned to disbelief, disbelief to grief. Online forums filled with messages of love and confusion. Fans searched for answers that weren't there. There was no warning, no public illness, no clue, just quiet. The world that Daniel had filled with wisdom, laughter, and inspiration now felt eerily still. His students, his friends, and thousands of followers were left with one haunting question. How could someone so full of life be gone so suddenly? In the days that followed, tributes poured in. Streamers paused their broadcast to honor him. Tournaments held moments of silence. Messages from grandmasters and fans alike painted a picture of a man who had touched countless lives with his kindness and brilliance. His final known words to a close friend would echo through every memorial shared afterward. Don't worry about anything. I love you so much. Simple, profound, and heartbreakingly final. Daniel Naroditsky's story wasn't just about chess. It was about humanity, creativity, and the fragile beauty of mind that gave so much to the world. But this was only the beginning of understanding the man behind the moves, and the mystery of how such a brilliant light could fade so suddenly. In the months before his passing, Daniel Naroditsky's online presence was a masterclass in consistency, warmth, and quiet brilliance. To thousands, he was more than a chess streamer. He was a mentor through the screen. His Twitch streams were never just about the board. They were about the beauty of thinking, the joy of learning, and the subtle humor he carried through every move. When he went live, viewers instantly felt at home. His deep voice, calm tone, and analytical precision made even the most complex positions feel understandable. The chat wasn't just a place for comments. It was a community. Good evening, everyone, he would say, and hundreds of people from across the world would respond with a flood of emojis and greetings. He had a rare ability to make the most technical game feel like a conversation with a friend. Between moves, he'd share life advice, funny observations, or a story from one of his tournaments. To his fans, those moments weren't filler. They were personal treasures. One of his final recorded streams, now viewed as hauntingly symbolic, showed Daniel analyzing a quiet endgame position. It's funny, he said, smiling slightly, how sometimes, even when the board looks simple, there's still so much happening underneath. At the time, it sounded like chess wisdom. Today, it feels like something deeper, a quiet reflection of life itself. He had recently spoken about new projects, books, collaborations, and training sessions for young players who admired him. Everything about him suggested a man full of purpose, someone still building, still dreaming. But as weeks passed, viewers noticed subtle changes. The streams grew shorter. He appeared more tired, pausing longer between words. His humor was still there, but it carried a softness, a kind of melancholy only the attentive could hear. Still, no one suspected anything was wrong. In the digital age, we often forget that even the brightest faces on our screens can be fighting silent battles behind them. Daniel smiled through his final broadcasts, never revealing a hint of pain. And then one evening, he simply didn't press go live. Days turned into a week. His community wondered if he was traveling or working on something new. His social media went quiet, no posts, no updates. For someone as connected as Daniel, the silence was strange, but fans stayed hopeful. No one imagined that his final stream would be the last time the world would ever hear his voice. October 2025 began like any other month in the chess world. Tournaments were underway. Streams were scheduled, and fans eagerly awaited Daniel's next live session. But beneath the surface, a quiet anxiety had begun to grow. Messages filled his comment sections. Anyone heard from Danya? Is he okay? Maybe he's taking a break. Then one morning, the Charlotte Chess Center released a message that would stop the chess world in its tracks. A few lines, simple and devastating. It is with deepest sorrow that we announce the unexpected passing of Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky. Please respect the privacy of his family during this time. Within minutes, disbelief spread across social media. Grandmasters, students, and fans all shared the same reaction. This can't be real. The announcement didn't mention how or why, just that he was gone. The chess world collectively froze. Clips of his old streams began resurfacing, moments of laughter, insight, and calm. Viewers rewatched them not as lessons, but as memories. Every smile, every phrase, every thoughtful silence now carried new meaning. The news reached major chess organizations, journalists, and fans from every continent. Hikaru Nakamura, Levi Rosman, and other top players shared tributes filled with heartbreak. The U.S. Chess Federation honored him as one of the game's brightest voices. Not only a grandmaster, but a storyteller who made chess feel human. His students at the Charlotte Chess Center gathered in quiet reflection, sharing stories about how Daniel's encouragement had changed their lives. Some recalled how he stayed after lessons just to talk, to listen, to remind them that chess was about joy, not pressure. The stream stopped, but his presence lingered everywhere, in his books, his games, his words. A few days after his passing, a fan wrote, "He didn't just teach us how to move pieces. He taught us how to think, how to breathe through chaos. That's what made him special." It was a sentiment echoed by thousands. And yet, amid the flood of memories, one truth remained unbearable. No one truly knew what happened. The details of his passing were not made public. There were no official statements, no confirmed explanations, just an overwhelming, painful silence. For a community built on logic, that silence was hard to accept. People wanted answers, reasons, closure, but all they could hold on to were memories of a man who turned a quiet, ancient game into something poetic and alive. In his absence, even the board seemed emptier. The pieces were still there. The lessons remained. But the voice that gave them meaning was gone. And so, the world did what Daniel always encouraged his followers to do after a loss: reflect, learn, and move forward with grace. Still, one question echoed through the community. What happens when the mind that taught millions how to see beyond the board disappears into silence? That question would carry into the days that followed. Days filled with mourning, tributes, and a desperate search to understand what no one could explain. The day after the news broke, Chess.com's homepage turned black and white. A single photograph of Daniel, smiling softly, eyes full of thought, replaced the usual news headlines. Beneath it, one sentence: "Rest in peace, Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky, 1995 to 2025. That image spread across the internet like wildfire. On Reddit, thousands of users flooded our /chess with memories, screenshots, and messages that read like letters to an old friend. Some said his voice had gotten them through lonely nights. Others credited him with inspiring them to pick up the game again after years away. Streamers paused their broadcasts in silence. Players who had competed against him in tournaments shared stories that revealed the man behind the mind. One wrote, "When I lost him, he didn't just shake my hand. He told me exactly what I'd done right. He wanted everyone to learn, even in defeat." Within hours, online chess servers lit up with tribute matches. Players from different countries started games dedicated to him, adding notes in the chat. For Danya, in his honor, GG Daniel. But it wasn't just a chess world that mourned. It was a community he built. Teachers, students, and fans who had never met him in person felt his absence deeply. For years, his streams have been a place where thousands found comfort in logic and laughter, a refuge in a noisy digital world. Clips of his iconic quotes flooded social media. Every move is a new chance. Learn from losses, they're your best teachers. And perhaps the most shared of all, chess isn't about crushing someone. It's about discovering something. Each quote carried more weight now, like echoes of a teacher still whispering lessons from beyond the board. Chess clubs across the U.S. held memorial tournaments in his name. Players wore black ribbons on their wrists. At the Charlotte Chess Center, candles lined the walls beside boards mid-game, frozen in positions that would never be finished. There, among his students, silence became sacred. The young players he once coached sat with tears in their eyes, recalling his voice guiding them through the hardest puzzles. Some couldn't even bring themselves to move a single piece. In that moment, chess wasn't competition. It was communion, a shared grief for a man whose brilliance had made the game feel like art. As the initial shock turned into remembrance, the chess world began to reflect on what Daniel had truly meant to the game. He wasn't just a grandmaster. He was a bridge, connecting the intellectual elite to everyday dreamers who simply wanted to understand. In a sport often known for its intensity and isolation, Daniel brought warmth. He proved that intelligence didn't need arrogance, that mastery could coexist with humility. His colleagues recalled his patience during commentary sessions, how he would gently explain even the simplest moves to beginners tuning in for the first time. He never talked down to people, one journalist said. He lifted them up to his level. The online chess community, once divided by ego and competition, found itself united by loss. Chess.com hosted a global event titled A Day for Danya. Thousands of games were played simultaneously in his memory. Players from over 80 countries joined, their usernames carrying small tributes. Danya fan for Naroditsky, move by move. In one emotional broadcast, a student who had trained under him shared, "When he taught me chess, he wasn't teaching me how to win. He was teaching me how to see the world differently." That was the essence of Daniel Naroditsky. He made thinking beautiful. Even those who never met him felt changed by his words. A fan from India wrote, "I've never met him, but when I was struggling in college, I'd watch his videos. His calm voice, his patience. It made me believe in myself again." Stories like that poured in from every corner of the world. In just a few days, Daniel's name became more than a memory. It became a movement. Chess federations began discussing an annual Naroditsky Award for Educational Excellence, a tribute to those who use chess to teach, inspire, and heal just as he had. But even with all the tributes, tournaments, and articles, one truth remained. No celebration could ever fill the silence he left behind. Because Daniel wasn't just part of the chess community. He was its heartbeat. And when that heartbeat stopped, the world realized how deeply it had been listening. Still, through his books, his lessons, his laughter caught forever in archive streams. He continues to speak. Every time a student makes a quiet, brilliant move, every time a fan replays one of his analyses, every time someone whispers, "What would Danya have done here?" he lives again. In the timeless universe of chess, 64 squares and endless possibilities, Daniel Naroditsky became what every great player hopes to be, immortal. His story reminds us that the measure of genius isn't in how long you live, but how deeply you make others think, feel, and grow. And though the final move came far too soon, Daniel's legacy ensures the game will never truly end. If Daniel's story has touched you so far, take a second to keep his light alive. Hit that like button. Share this video with someone who loves the game and help his legacy reach every corner of the chess world. Let's remind people that behind every move, there's a human story. Long before he was a grandmaster, before the titles and the commentary desk lights, Daniel Naroditsky was just a quiet kid with an old wooden chessboard and a heart full of curiosity. Born in California, he found magic not in noise or fame, but in silence. The kind of silence where thoughts had space to breathe. Those who knew him best say he was always a thinker, not just about chess, but about life, people, and meaning. He'd sit in cafes, sipping black coffee, eyes wandering somewhere distant, like he was always solving a problem only he could see. And when someone asked what he was thinking about, he'd smile and say something simple. Everything connects if you look long enough. That was Daniel's philosophy in a single line. He saw patterns not just on the board, but in the world itself. To him, chess was never a battle. It was a conversation, a way to understand people without words. In interviews, he often said the game wasn't about crushing opponents, but about harmony, how two minds could meet through 64 squares and create something beautiful together. That belief made his commentary stand out. When others filled the air with analysis and ego, Daniel filled it with empathy. He could explain the most complex positions like he was telling a story. He didn't just talk about moves, he talked about moments. He'd say, "Here, white hesitated, and that tells you everything about fear." Or, "This isn't a blunder, it's a heartbeat. We all make them." To his students, Daniel wasn't just a teacher. He was a mentor who understood what it meant to feel small in a world obsessed with perfection. He encouraged them to play boldly, not because it guaranteed victory, but because it taught courage. One former student shared, He told me once, losing a game doesn't make you less worthy. It just means a lesson isn't finished yet. That line changed how I see failure forever. Even his friends outside of chess recall how deeply he listened. He never interrupted, never filled silences. When he spoke, it was thoughtful, measured, like he was choosing each word with the precision of a chess move. Behind the quiet intellect was someone deeply human, funny, kind, and humble. He loved puns, late-night takeout, and random trivia about cities he'd never been to. He'd laugh at his own jokes, usually right before anyone else did. It made people comfortable, as if they didn't have to be perfect around him to be seen. When the cameras were off, Daniel wasn't trying to be a public figure. He was trying to be a better friend, a better teacher, a better human being. His private journal, according to one close friend, was filled not with chess notes, but reflections on life, gratitude lists, reminders to stay patient, to be gentle with himself. That gentle nature was what drew people to him. In a field where brilliance can often turn cold, Daniel's light was warm. He showed that true intelligence wasn't about domination, it was about compassion. After his passing, several colleagues reflected on his quiet influence. A grandmaster who once co-hosted with him said, "Daniel had this ability to make you want to think deeper, not louder. He didn't just elevate chess, he elevated people." His students say they still hear his voice when they faced oppositions, calm, steady, guiding them through their own storms. To them, his lessons weren't just about pawns and kings. They were about patience, empathy, and resilience. Even those who only knew him through a screen felt a strange sense of personal loss. Because in an era where online fame often feels hollow, Daniel's presence felt real. Every stream, every game, every smile, it carried authenticity. He had no interest in being worshipped. He wanted to connect, to make people feel seen. That's why his absence feels so sharp, because he made millions feel like they mattered. His philosophy was simple. If you love something, give it away. And he did. His knowledge, his time, his kindness, all of it, without ever asking for anything in return. In one of his final interviews, he said something that now feels almost prophetic. You don't get to choose how long you'll play the game, but you do get to choose how beautiful your moves will be while you're here. That's the essence of who Daniel Naroditsky was. Not just a man who mastered the game, but a soul who turned mastery into meaning. His legacy wasn't built on trophies or titles. It was built on every person who walked away from his lessons a little wiser, a little kinder, a little more in love with the world. And maybe that's why his story hurt so deeply. Because he reminded us that brilliance doesn't have to burn. It can simply shine. Even now, in the quiet moments when a chess clock ticks or a pawn takes its first move, you can almost hear his voice, gentle, guiding, whispering across the board. Breathe, think, play the move that feels right. Because that's what he did in chess and in life. When news of Daniel Naroditsky's death began to settle, the grief slowly transformed into something else, reflection. The chess world, for all its precision and intellect, had never been forced to face its own silence around pain. Daniel's passing cracked that silence open. For years, mental health had been the quiet topic nobody wanted to discuss in the chess community. A game of intellect and endurance, chess often glorified isolation, long hours, sleepless nights, the quiet grind of perfectionism. But Daniel's story reminded everyone that even the brightest minds carry unseen battles. In the weeks that followed, major platforms like chess.com and Fi began openly discussing mental health in competitive spaces. Articles titled The Human Side of Genius and What We Owe to Our Players filled the news feeds. Streamers and grandmasters began talking candidly about burnout, anxiety, and emotional weight of constant performance. It wasn't about turning grief into headlines. It was about continuing Daniel's work, building spaces where kindness and understanding could exist alongside ambition. At the Charlotte Chess Center, where he'd spent so many hours mentoring young players, a new initiative launched, the Naroditsky Foundation for Mindful Mentorship. Its mission was simple, to make chess education as much about emotional strength as technical mastery. Workshops on resilience, mental health awareness, and community mentorship became part of regular training. And every year, one student would receive a scholarship in Daniel's name, awarded not for the highest rating, but for the most compassion shown others. That single change, measuring greatness through empathy, captured everything Daniel stood for. Online, his legacy took root in other ways. Fans began posting short clips of his advice under the tag #DanielWisdom. Quotes that once lived in quiet live streams now spread like light across social media. Every move tells a story. You're not your rating, you're your effort. If you lose beautifully. Simple phrases, but profound. They became mantras for a generation of players learning that strength doesn't come from dominance. It comes from grace. Teachers around the world began incorporating Daniel's lessons into their programs. Schools in the U.S., India, and the Philippines introduced mindful chess sessions where children learned to slow down, breathe, and think beyond the board. One teacher wrote online, "Daniel's calm changed how I teach. I tell my students to play with heart because that's what he did." Meanwhile, at tournaments, players started a quiet ritual. Before the first round, they'd place a white knight at the center of the board for a moment of silence, a symbol of Daniel's creativity and courage. Then they begin their games, each move a silent tribute. The chess community also began to see justice in a broader, more human sense. Not about crime or punishment, but about fairness, kindness, and care for one another. Daniel's story became a reminder that success should never cost one's peace, and that no player, no matter how brilliant, should feel alone inside the game they love. As the months passed, tributes poured in from across the world. Murals, tournaments, online events. But one moment stood above the rest. At the annual Fight Awards, a new recognition was announced. The Daniel Naroditsky Humanitarian Award. It was given to individuals who used chess as a tool for healing in schools, prisons, and war-torn communities. When his parents stepped on stage to accept the inaugural award, the room fell silent. His father said softly, "Daniel believed chess could make people better. Now it's our turn to prove him right." And in that moment, his legacy became something larger than life. It became action. Today, even years later, Daniel's voice still drifts through the digital halls of Twitch and YouTube. His old streams, once just lessons, now feel like letters from a friend, reminders to slow down, to think, to care. Viewers still tune in, not just to learn chess, but to feel a little less alone. Because that's what he left behind, connection. His students continue his teachings, his friends continue his kindness, and his fans continue his mission to make intelligence gentle and genius human. In the end, justice for Daniel Naroditsky isn't found in answers or investigations. It's found in how people changed after he was gone, how his passing made the chess world more compassionate, more open, more aware that brilliance can shine without burning out. And maybe that's the greatest victory of all. Because in the quiet spaces between moves, where thought meets heart, Daniel's presence still lingers. A gentle reminder that true greatness isn't about how many games you win. It's about how many lives you touch before the clock runs out. So every time a young player lifts a pawn for the first time, every time a commentator takes a breath before explaining a complex line, every time someone learns patience through the rhythm of the game, Daniel lives on. He taught us that the most powerful moves in life are often the kindest ones. And though his final game ended far too soon, his legacy continues, one thoughtful move at a time. Daniel Naroditsky taught us that kindness is the most powerful move of all. If his story moved you, honor his memory by sharing this video. Not for views, but for the message. Subscribe for more stories that celebrate life, legacy, and the humans behind the headlines. Because remembering is a first step to keeping greatness alive.